I'm going to invite Ruvimbo for her presentation, and then after that, we will have a panel discussion between Tony, Nancy, and Ruvimbo. So, Ruvimbo, would you like to come on?
Yes, you can play the video.
There we go. Thank you. All right.
I'm still not breathing. Walking on this scorched soil, burning my feet, the ground cracks. Yes. I am pulled down inside. Deep darkness, my enemies pray. They light red and black candles. I stand in the center of nowhere, naked, throwing blood at me. I see rats, I see snakes, I see owls. They shout, they call me names. I must be poor. I must be worthless. I must be used by those who want to make me a toy. I'm just a body of bones. No sight. Walking among the dead. A fire glows around me. They push me. I shout. Tears wet my body. I see razors. They cut me open. Brown and black things they put in my skin. They put scars. I fall down in pain. I am whipped. I am defeated. I am praying. I'm about to be devoured. They say you will never make it in life. You are born to be a slave. You are powerless. They take it all away. My spirit leaves me. My soul can no longer hold. I am departed. The light comes out of the blue. The heavens open. I am lifted. Then I awake.
I was just thinking about when Tony was speaking about her poetry. I'm not a poet, it's theater, and it was very emotional going through that process. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, thank you.
Oh, fantastic. I feel like I'm alone, there's a black screen.
It is very hard because we're all hidden, but we can see you, and if you need us, shout.
Yes.
My mic is muted. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. So my name is Zoe Black, Ruvimbo Tenga today. I don't normally like going by my name. I've always worked in the shadows, and I think this is what undercover for darkness means to me. That being hidden and not being visible, but existing at the same time. So I grew up in Zimbabwe, came to South Africa as a migrant sex worker. And it was very interesting coming to learn about what sex work is, as opposed to the derogatory term, which is prostitution. And learning the difference between the term was very interesting because the term sex work was coined by a lady called Carol Lee. She's an activist in the US. And in the 70s, the women used to fight over this, about labor and work. And at a women's conference to say, but there is sex workers. And then it was a big feminist argument, but how can someone decide to sell sex? Is it a form of work? Is it a form of labor? So coming to South Africa, I found myself in a place where I had to acknowledge that this is a form of income. I don't need to have an education. I don't need to be asking someone for money. And I don't need to be borrowing, because I'd run away from the ex-husband with about 4 children. And I was like, what am I going to do? So I think my whole advocacy woke up meeting other women who are in like spaces. And I started to question, but when did this problem start in South Africa? And remembering today's Human Rights Day, sex work has been criminalized in South Africa since 1957 under the Sexual Offences Act. Everything else has been decriminalized. homosexuality has been decriminalized, when you think of whatever interracial marriages have been decriminalized, but sex work remains a crime. And it's somehow, I don't know whether it's lack of political will, because when we say that women have choice and autonomy, what does that mean then for a poor Black woman? Because that is the stereotype that it is because of poverty. I think it's also out of the limits of choices that we have as women, sex work falls in that spectrum. And I feel those women who choose to sell sex at whatever point in their life, whether it's short-term, long-term, medium-term, like any other profession, should be given that space to be able to do the work and be protected and not let human rights be violated. So that was I think that's where my activism rose, and becoming a Sisonke member, which is the National Sex Worker Movement in South Africa, where sex workers mobilize ourselves to speak as one voice. Because SWET is a service provider, that's the Sex Worker Education Advocacy Task Force. They're a service provider, they work around the HIV and the human rights of sex workers. But sex workers had to have a voice for themselves where we can speak and stand together, and also collect like a membership that how many people are actually sex workers. So you'll see that Sisonke has got about 9 provincial offices, if I stand to be corrected. And then around the country, there is a space where sex workers can meet. And in case something happens to you, you can report. SWET has a 24-hour helpline, and you can call anytime and speak to a paralegal or a counselor. And that was very nice because you had this space that in case something happens. But being a migrant sex worker is a different ballgame, because it's not everybody who's documented. It's not everyone who's got the right papers. And some people do have documentation. So that's when the migration element comes to play, because home affairs in South Africa is very difficult. I don't know, it's got its own challenges, which I don't understand. And even trying to seek for an asylum is difficult in South Africa, because especially if you're coming from a country like Zimbabwe, they tend to say you are more of an economic migrant. But whatever is happening in Zimbabwe is my personal, but it's also very political, even if I'm not affiliated to a political party. So as a woman, what choices do I have? Do I stay at home where I will starve and struggle to make a living? Or do I go out to make an ends meet and have a living for my children? I look after my mom, my kids, and it's work. Having to raise 4 kids alone is something else. But in the midst of my everything, I think I found myself coming here to South Africa. And I think my sexuality also came out, because I found out that, okay, I like men. I've been married to a man for a long time, but I'm attracted to women. And I was like, what is this now? And through interacting with other people and also learning more around sexuality, I think the first book I read around sexuality was Nkunzi's Black Women, Man's Ancestors. And I was like, Sangomas can be lesbians. Oh, that is amazing. But as I read that book with that mind, I also started to have my own spiritual awakening, and my sexuality also came into play. Like, I started to question myself, and I found myself going to Triangle Project and now working with LGBTI people. And coming from a very homophobic era of Mugabe and saying that gays and lesbians are Western pigs and dogs, and then now you want to do activism in a foreign country, is like, the intelligence must be watching me. I think we always, Zimbabweans always have this, the CIDs, the Central Intelligence must be around the corner. You don't say things that are wrong. You don't try and trying to live on the shadow of that also of, yay, I don't think I can go back home right now because it's not safe. I think that was something of a challenge for me. And also, I think some of my most interesting work was working with the Women's Legal Center, where it was women who were paralegals, attorneys, and work with women's issues and women's wellness and women's court struggles and women's battles. And then sitting on the ASIJIKI coalition, which was the coalition for the decriminalization of sex work. So I think one thing that I learned the first time I got to SWET was that knowledge is power. And readers are leaders. We need to read to understand. We need to read history. We need to understand where things originate from. And I remember there's a saying, if you want to hide anything from a Black person, put it in a book. So it was one of those things like, I need to interrogate what's happening. I might not have the education, I might not have the qualification, but I need to also think. And then that's when I started having a mentor who'd help me to question decrim, but I also had mentors. So I think I am because what I am today because of mentors and support and questioning. And this thing, what I found interesting, because in that process of reading, I was also started to see the inequality and privilege and came into feminism. And I had a problem because I was always discriminated against being like a coconut, or people say things about me, you're too dark, you're too Black, you need to be married to a white man, you're not Black enough. And I used to like, but this Blackness thing, I don't understand it. I'm like I'm everything African about me, so why don't my people embrace me? And then when I used to go to white communities, people would just, my hippiness was well received and I was normal. And I was like, but there was this point when I came and it's like, no, white people and privilege. And I had to interrogate my own understanding and try to build my own thoughts around, but the same Black people in my community discriminate me and put me down. And how come in certain spaces, am I a poor Black person and someone is feeling sorry for me? And I said, I'll move with those people who will push me forward instead of staying, even with my people who are going to push me back. And I think with the history of colonization, which is very problematic and troublesome, there's no apologies for that. 400 years of slavery is not a joke. But I also feel in my own Black community, I'm constantly trembled on because of the choices that I make and pushed further underground because I cannot be who I want to be. And I find that I struggle every time. And when I think of feminism as a place where women from an intersectional space are supposed to come together, it also becomes a very hierarchical space where there's gatekeepers. If you haven't read certain things, books which you can't afford, and English you can't understand, because language also is a privilege. We can't just say because we can all speak English, then we are fine, but you need to know a certain kind. And it's like, but that doesn't make sense. If feminism is supposed to pull women together. When I started reading Audre Lorde, that was a few weeks ago, less than 2 months, because I was always questioning what feminism was from other people, and I would always hear her name and Hoopspell and everybody else. I was like, but I don't know because I never had access to that. But I lied because I found one of the books in my drive and I was like, okay, I should have started reading a little bit earlier on. And then I started understanding a little bit more of consciousness raising. Where are we raising? Where are we educating each other? Where are we having these spaces? Because feminism can also be elitist. But where do we meet as Black people and also have a more of a line? Because there's a lot of, the line is not straight. So I think these are more of my thoughts more than anything, where I'm trying to understand who am I and what am I doing. But one of the most interesting things, I was speaking about the Asichiki Coalition, was for the decriminalization of sex work, it was an interesting platform where people used to work in pockets and circles. So Swet, Sisonke, WLCA, and Swet came together and formed to be the steering committee of the coalition. And then now it sits at about 111 organizations in South Africa who support decrim, and that's like amazing. And other international organizations also, and I was like, wow. So there is a buy-in, but very little political in. When I look at the work I've done, like with the Positive Policing Partnership, that's the PPP, and the work that is being done around engaging with the police. The one thing you can engage with the police, they just enforce the law. But the Department of Justice is the one that can change the law. And it's been a very shaky field. It's just crazy. And I think what else now? I'm also part of the sex worker theater. That's one of my biggest passions. I think I grew up in theater in Zimbabwe. I loved theater. I was in Red Teens, always in theater, worked backstage because I was never an actress. I never wanted to learn lines. Cramming things was not my thing. And then many years after even coming here, I was looking for theater spaces because I used to work at festivals, the Female Women's International Festival in Harare, the Zimbabwe International Festival. I've worked at the German Society. And I came here and I lost all that because I was like, this is about survival. But through Sweat, we're able to be part of the Global Grace Project, which is hosted by the AGI and the Center for Dance and Drama, UCT. And I was like, yay! So when they called for auditions, I was like, my life is coming back. Yes, I went for auditions to be backstage, and then I found myself now performing on the theater. And I think what's amazing on this theater, because we're coming to our final year now, where we've learned many modules. And we've learned about theater of the oppressed, what the kind of work that Bawal was doing in Brazil. We've learned about, I think it's yes, participatory theater. We've learned how to do mime. We've learned some Buto with Jackie Jobs. That was amazing. I think I fell in love with Buto. What I wanted to do today was some Buto because I was like, I'm not yet a master, but I love Buto because it was a Japanese kind of form of resistance theater. When the world wars were happening, people started to now express their bodies, using their bodies and the movement and all this trauma and anger. It was very amazing. We've recently done the clip that we saw when I was speaking was from Writing the South with Jason, and it was amazing just learning how to write poetry from scratch. And currently we're going to be starting a new module. So we've had about 3 performances, and we're starting another physical theater and mask making process. So I'm super excited for that. And I'm like, theater has let me release a lot of trauma, a lot of hurt, and a lot of pain. And you'd never think that theater as a tool is a healing space, because you need to strip yourself constantly, strip yourself from that darkness, those dark places, and that's what you need to bring constantly. And it's scary because sometimes you sit in sessions and maybe you're just doing breath, because Sarah Machet loves breath. We breathe. You breathe until you cry. You buto, you have to stretch your body beyond your own personal capacity. And it's a fineness in it, because you have to be very vulnerable to yourself. You constantly have to strip yourself naked, regardless of what you think and what you do. So I've been in those spaces in my mind that, for me, sex work has shown me the world. I've been part of exhibitions, currently in an exhibition with Candice Blitz, and it's in Germany and it's toured Europe. It's called Too Long to Read, LTD. I've done things that I used to fly to Joburg and I would cry, because I'm like, if sex work had not chosen me, where would I be right now? I'll be someone's wife with many children. I don't know. But sex work gave me a freedom to explore, to get in touch with myself, to question myself, and to find a liberation that I don't think even beyond my wildest dreams. I don't think if it wasn't for sex work, I'll be here right now. and also, like, when you think of things like sitting on the Sweat board, it's amazing, because you're now sitting in an organization. When I came in as a service user, where I came in as a volunteer, where I worked as a media liaison, and then becoming a consultant now, a freelance consultant, and then sitting on the board, it gives you a bigger scope of what an organization works and runs like. And you start to see things. Sometimes we think directors or staff members of this person, you start to see through those levels, it starts to broaden your mind. And it's been very interesting having sex workers and COVID. It's been the craziest things ever, because since sex workers is criminalized, sex workers could not get UIF, could not get access to funding, and it's further pushed sex workers underground again, where it's like, why? And then when you look at, there's something that happened recently, it was on the Fans Only, where people who sell services online, the government would want to put tax on them. It's like, but sex work is criminalized, so a street-based sex worker cannot sell sex legally, but someone can just, they want to tax the people that sell online. yeah, so I think it's a lot of thoughts. I think this is for me is more for conversation, where I'm trying to talk and also let us know and engage with each other. So I think that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you so much, Ruvimbo. I think that there's, you know, the so interesting that what you were saying is that the paths that lead us to particular spaces and the unexpected turns that takes, and it's sometimes through the hurt and through the trauma that we arrive in a space.